Where are the tax cutters these days?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if they're not in, if they're not the, you mentioned that the GOP proposals are still eye-wateringly expensive, just not quite as crucifyingly expensive as those of the Democrats. Is this a reflection of a detached political elite, Freddie, or is it actually a reflection of the electorate? Or do you actually find in the electorate, you know, ordinary American folk on the electoral roll are craving tax cuts? It's just they now no longer have any politicians in any party that are sort of representing those get spending down, get my income tax down type Reaganite meme.
Well, it's a really interesting question because, of course, the Tea Party back in 2010 was a sort of tax revolt. And that was a grassroots Republican movement that sort of did foment the Trump movement. But now surveys suggest, polls suggest that Trump people are not interested in that. And they think that tax cutting has become associated with the sort of vile Iraq war, Bush era, evil Republican Party that they don't want anything to do with, and that has tried to crush them repeatedly. So I think there are sort of voices of fiscal sanity in the Republican Party, but it has to be done very sotto voce. People like Marco Rubio won't sort of say it out loud anymore. It has to be presented in a different way. I think what might happen though is the electorate are notoriously fickle, and if Biden's inflationary policies start to really hurt America, you will find America rediscovering its fondness for low taxation and real money quite quickly, I think.
Steve, where are they, the classical liberal tax cutters? I mean, there's the four of us on the Live with Littlewood YouTube channel. Is that it on both sides of the pond, pretty much?
No, I think there are plenty of people around who support the idea of tax cuts. The problem is, I think, as Freddie said, the electorate has moved away from that at the moment. And I think there's two reasons for that. One is that the electorate has basically, well, they would like to pay less tax, I think, but they think that this will lead to less money being spent on public services, and they still want the high levels of public spending. And so they may not favour raising taxes on themselves, all in favour of raising taxes on the people, but they also want high levels of public spending. And that makes it a very hard climate for people who want to reduce the amount of money the state takes. The other thing I think, though, is more subtle, and that is that taxes are associated with nationalism. It's associated with the idea that you're a citizen of a national political entity and you're putting money into the kind of collective pot that we all share. And I think that there's been a big upsurge of nationalism on particularly the political right, like the Trumpists that Freddie mentioned. And for them, therefore, cutting taxes is a means of giving away control of what is really a collective budget to a globally rootless cosmopolitan class and big corporations. Now, that's a very, the only way to rebut that argument from a liberal point of view is to argue the case for individualism and to say that basically, what this should be about is about individual self-determination. But that's what we're up against. It's not so much socialism as such or social democracy. It's the national collectivism that is driving a lot of the support for higher taxes at the moment, or at least not reducing them.
Matt, do you buy that analysis? It's
I think it's really interesting analysis. I think it's really interesting in terms of like in America, in North America, there are two countries, right? Obviously, you've got different nations underneath America, but you've got like Canada and the USA are like by definition kind of yin and yang to one another. And a lot of nationalism in America is associated with the American right. And because of that, and because of Canada's size compared to America, a lot of the politics is about not being American. And therefore, the nationalism in Canada is much more associated with left-wing movements, but not just Quebec, but also the Liberals, to support like their version of the NHS, which is the only system in the world which is like the NHS, is the Be Canadian, and it's a lot of the sort of like. So I wonder, therefore, Steve, there are two like. I can outweight the failures of state spending, because I know that in 10 years' time the credit card will run out, and our ideology very much still there. However, in terms of the politics, there are two ways it could go, right? Left libertarians or some emerge maybe out of some left-wing groups that go, actually, we don't want to be controlled by the center. We want to control our own budgets smaller and smaller, but we still want collective budgets and collective spending. Or it will come out of the right, and that will be. But I think it's the left one that I think is most interesting, because it will be how the Democrats respond to their hegemony on these issues, but also the threat to their hegemony from the right, and they could be wholesale taken by the right in an election that would be much more devastating to their projects and their plans than if they come up with a coherent narrative against it in themselves.